The people who receive the most respect are often not the loudest, the friendliest, or even the most talented. In many cases, they are simply the hardest to access. That sounds unfair, yet human psychology has been revealing this pattern for decades. The more available a person becomes, the more their presence starts to feel ordinary. The more they give away their time, attention, and energy without limits, the more those things lose their perceived value. Most people spend years trying to earn respect by giving more, helping more, explaining more, and proving more. Yet the results rarely match the effort. They become the person everyone can call, everyone can have favors from, and everyone can rely on. But slowly, without noticing it, they stop being appreciated and start being expected. That is where one of the most misunderstood laws of human behavior begins to reveal itself. The uncomfortable reality is that people do not always judge value based on quality. They often judge value based on scarcity. This principle influences everything from luxury brands and exclusive memberships to social status and personal relationships. What is rare attracts attention. What attracts attention gains importance. And what gains importance earns respect. This hidden psychological mechanism operates quietly in everyday life, shaping how people perceive others without them even realizing it. The fascinating part is that most people never learn this lesson. They spend their lives making themselves easier to access, while wondering why they feel overlooked, ignored, or taken for granted. In this video, we will uncover the dark psychology of value and explore why scarcity has such a powerful effect on human perception. You will learn why being constantly available can damage your influence, why attention is more valuable than most people realize, why boundaries create respect, and why some individuals naturally command admiration without demanding it. We will also examine the difference between genuine self-worth and manipulation, because many people misunderstand this principle and end up playing games that eventually destroy trust. The truth is far more powerful than any strategy. Once you understand it, you begin to see human interactions through an entirely different lens. As we move deeper into this topic, you will discover lesser-known psychological patterns that quietly shape friendships, workplaces, social circles, and even romantic relationships. Some of these insights may challenge beliefs you have carried for years. Others may explain experiences that never seemed to make sense before. By the end of this video, you will understand why certain people effortlessly attract respect while others constantly chase it. And more importantly, how to stop undervaluing yourself without becoming arrogant, cold, or detached. Stay with me until the end, because the final lesson ties everything together and reveals the most important principle of all, the one that separates temporary attention from lasting respect. If you enjoy psychology, human behavior, and the hidden forces that influence everyday life, then you are in the right place. Welcome to the channel. Make sure to subscribe and join us for more deep insights into the psychology that shapes the world around us. The strange thing about value is that it rarely begins with quality. Most people assume that if something is useful, talented, beautiful, or important, it will automatically be respected. But human psychology does not always work that way. Before people decide how much something is worth, they often look at how easy it is to obtain. This pattern appears everywhere. A product that is available in unlimited quantities rarely creates excitement. A product that exists in limited numbers suddenly becomes desirable. The object itself may not change at all. The quality may remain exactly the same. Yet the moment access becomes limited, perception changes. This is known as the scarcity principle, one of the most powerful forces influencing human behavior. Scarcity tells the mind that something may not always be available. And once the possibility of losing access enters the picture, attention increases immediately. Luxury brands understand this principle better than almost anyone. Many luxury products are not purchased simply because of their practical function. There are watches that tell time no better than a standard watch. There are bags that carry items no better than ordinary bags. There are cars that transport people just as effectively as less expensive alternatives. Yet people are willing to pay enormous amounts for them. Why? Because scarcity creates status. Limited access creates desirability. The fewer people who can obtain something, the more valuable it appears. Exclusive clubs use the same psychology. Membership is restricted. Entry requirements exist. Not everyone is allowed inside. The restrictions themselves become part of the attraction. Opportunities work the same way. When an opportunity is available to everyone forever, people delay action. When the opportunity becomes limited, interest rises. Rare experiences often become unforgettable, not because they are objectively better, but because they feel special. Scarcity creates attention. Attention creates value. Value creates demand. What most people never realize is that this principle extends far beyond products and opportunities. It also applies to human beings. The way people perceive your value is influenced by how available you are. A person whose time is constantly accessible often receives less respect than someone whose time is protected. At first, this sounds unfair. It may even sound selfish. But human psychology repeatedly follows this pattern. People pay attention to what appears valuable, and value is often linked to scarcity. This does not mean becoming distant or cold. It means understanding how perception works. The person who constantly gives away access without limits often teaches others that access has little value. Many people unknowingly fall into this trap. They answer every message immediately. They agree to every request. They solve every problem. They become available at all hours. They rarely say no. They rarely protect their schedule. Their intentions are usually good. They want to be helpful. They want to be liked. They want to avoid disappointing people. In the beginning, this behavior often receives praise. Others describe them as generous, reliable, and supportive. But over time, a subtle shift begins to occur. Appreciation slowly transforms into expectation. The help that once felt special becomes normal. The effort that once earned gratitude becomes assumed. What was once respected becomes taken for granted. This happens because the human mind quickly adapts to whatever becomes consistently available. The first favor may feel meaningful. The 10th favor feels routine. The first sacrifice may be appreciated. The 20th sacrifice becomes expected. The first immediate response feels considerate. Eventually, people stop noticing it altogether. Instead of thinking, this person is making time for me, they begin thinking, this person is always available. The difference between those two perceptions is enormous. One creates appreciation. The other creates entitlement. Psychologically, unlimited availability sends a message that most people never intend to communicate. It suggests that your time has no boundaries. It suggests that your attention is endlessly accessible. It suggests that your schedule can always be interrupted. People may never consciously think these exact thoughts, but their behavior begins reflecting them. If someone can access you whenever they want, they gradually stop treating that access as valuable. Familiarity grows, appreciation shrinks, expectations increase. This is why some of the most exhausted people are often the kindest people. They spend years saying yes because they believe generosity automatically creates respect. Yet, respect and accessibility are not always connected. A person can be incredibly generous and still be undervalued. A person can be endlessly available and still be overlooked. The problem is not kindness. The problem is the absence of boundaries. Boundaries create structure. Boundaries communicate value. Boundaries tell people that your time matters. Consider what happens when someone always explains themselves. Every decision requires justification. Every absence requires an explanation. Every boundary requires a defense. Slowly, they begin handing control of their life to the opinions of others. They stop deciding how to spend their time based on priorities and start deciding based on approval. This creates a dangerous cycle. The more approval they seek, the more approval they need. The more available they become, the less valuable their availability appears. Now another powerful psychological force enters the picture. Human beings are strongly influenced by the fear of loss. In behavioral psychology, researchers have repeatedly found that people often react more intensely to losing something than to gaining something of equal value. Losing $20 usually feels worse than finding $20 feels good. The emotional impact of loss is often stronger than the emotional impact of gain. This tendency affects relationships, opportunities, and social interactions in surprising ways. When something is consistently present, people become accustomed to it. They stop noticing it. They stop appreciating it. But when the possibility of losing it appears, attention returns immediately. This explains many situations that seem confusing on the surface. Someone may ignore another person's efforts for months or even years. Then the moment that person becomes less available, interest suddenly increases. The individual did not become more intelligent overnight. They did not become more attractive overnight. Their value did not suddenly appear from nowhere. What changed was perception. Access changed. The possibility of loss entered the equation. Attention increased. When attention increases, perceived value often rises with it. This principle appears constantly in human behavior. People often fail to appreciate what is consistently available because their minds classify it as permanent. Once permanence is questioned, urgency appears. This urgency is not always logical. It is emotional. The mind begins focusing on what might disappear. Suddenly, conversations feel more important. Time feels more meaningful. Presence feels more valuable. Many people misunderstand this phenomenon and attempt to manipulate it. They intentionally ignore others. They play communication games. They create artificial distance. They pretend to be busy. But genuine value cannot be built on performance. People eventually recognize when scarcity is fake. Real value comes from living a life that naturally requires selectivity. There is a difference between being unavailable because you are playing games and being unavailable because your priorities genuinely matter. This brings us to one of the most important ideas in the entire discussion. The most valuable thing you own is not money. It is not status. It is not possessions. It is attention. Most people spend years protecting their money while allowing anyone to consume their attention. Yet attention is the foundation of every meaningful achievement. Every skill requires attention. Every goal requires attention. Every relationship requires attention. Every dream requires attention. Wherever attention goes, life follows. Time and attention are closely connected, but they are not identical. Someone can spend an hour doing something while paying very little attention to it. Attention is the true currency behind progress. It determines what grows and what declines. It shapes habits, relationships, careers, and identities. Once attention is spent, it cannot be recovered. This is why every yes carries a hidden cost. Every invitation accepted means another possibility is rejected. Every commitment consumes time that could have been invested elsewhere. Every distraction pulls attention away from something more important. Many people focus only on what they gain by saying yes. They rarely think about what they lose. Highly respected individuals often understand this principle instinctively. Their selectiveness is not always about status. It is often about protection. They know that attention is limited, energy is limited, time is limited. Because these resources are limited, they must be allocated carefully. This does not make them selfish. It makes them intentional. The average person often treats attention as if it is endless. Notifications arrive, messages appear, requests multiply. Opinions demand responses, expectations increase. Without boundaries, attention becomes fragmented into hundreds of tiny pieces. Days become reactive instead of purposeful. Weeks disappear without meaningful progress. Months pass while important goals remain untouched. People who command respect usually approach attention differently. They understand that every commitment carries consequences. They recognize that saying yes to one thing often means saying no to another. They do not allow every demand immediate access to their focus. They create standards. They decide what deserves their energy. They choose where their attention will go, instead of allowing others to choose for them. This selectiveness often appears mysterious from the outside. Some people assume it is confidence. Others assume it is status. But underneath both of those perceptions lies a simple reality. They understand the value of limited resources. They understand that attention cannot be multiplied endlessly. They understand that every moment invested in one place is unavailable somewhere else. As a result, their presence feels different. Conversations feel intentional. Commitments feel meaningful. Time feels valuable. People notice when they show up because they are not showing up everywhere. People appreciate their attention because it is not distributed without limits. Their energy has boundaries, their schedule has standards, their focus has direction. And without saying a single word about their worth, they quietly communicate it through the way they manage the most valuable resource they possess. One of the biggest misunderstandings about respect is the belief that it is earned by tolerating more. Many people grow up believing that the path to acceptance is simple. Be agreeable, avoid conflict, keep everyone happy, never disappoint anyone. Never create discomfort. Never say no. At first, this approach seems to work. People like being around someone who is easy to deal with. They appreciate the person who never argues, never refuses requests, and never creates resistance. But as time passes, a hidden problem begins to emerge. What starts as kindness slowly becomes permission. What starts as patience slowly becomes expectation. And what starts as generosity slowly becomes a lack of boundaries. Human beings constantly learn how to treat others based on what they are allowed to do. Most of this learning happens unconsciously. People test limits without realizing it. They make requests. They ask for favors. They interrupt schedules. They expect attention. Then they observe the response. Every response teaches them something. If every request receives a yes, they learn that access is unlimited. If every interruption is accepted, they learn that interruptions are acceptable. If every demand is met immediately, they learn that immediate access is normal. This is why boundaries are so important. Boundaries reveal self-worth. They communicate what a person believes about the value of their own time, energy, and attention. A person who protects their boundaries sends a message without speaking. They communicate that their life has structure, their time matters, their priorities matter, their commitments matter. This message affects how others perceive them. When you tolerate everything, people eventually assume everything is acceptable. Not because they are cruel, not because they are intentionally disrespectful, but because human beings adapt to whatever becomes normal. The mind turns repeated experiences into expectations. If someone consistently allows their plans to be changed at the last minute, people stop feeling guilty for changing plans. If someone consistently sacrifices their needs for others, people stop recognizing the sacrifice. What once felt like a favor begins to feel like an obligation. This transformation happens slowly. That is what makes it dangerous. Few people wake up one morning and decide to take someone for granted. Instead, familiarity gradually removes appreciation. Repetition removes awareness. The extraordinary becomes ordinary. The special becomes expected. The opposite process happens when boundaries exist. When a person values their time, others begin valuing it too. When a person protects their energy, others become more careful with it. When a person refuses to tolerate disrespect, others learn that disrespect has consequences. Boundaries create awareness. Awareness creates respect. This is why some people can enter a room and immediately command respect without saying very much. It is not always because of confidence. It is not always because of status. Often it is because their behavior consistently communicates self-respect. Their boundaries tell people that access to them is not automatic. Their time is not available on demand. Their attention is not distributed without thought. Many people confuse boundaries with rejection. They assume that setting limits means becoming cold or distant. But boundaries are not walls. Walls keep everyone out. Boundaries simply define what is acceptable and what is not. They create structure, not isolation. A person with healthy boundaries can still be generous. They can still be caring. They can still be supportive. The difference is that their kindness exists within limits. Think about any valuable resource in the world. Valuable resources are rarely unlimited. There are rules governing access, there are conditions, there are costs, there are standards. Boundaries function in a similar way. They establish value through limitation. In a sense, boundaries are prices, and prices communicate value. Anything that has no cost is often treated carelessly. Anything that requires effort is treated differently. This principle extends into relationships. When someone knows they can constantly cancel plans without consequences, they often become careless. When someone knows they can continuously cross boundaries without resistance, they often continue doing so. Not necessarily because they are malicious, often because there is no signal telling them otherwise. Boundaries provide that signal. They create clarity, they remove confusion, they teach people how interactions should occur. Without boundaries, resentment often grows. A person continues giving more and more while receiving less and less. They become frustrated, exhausted, unappreciated. Yet the people around them may not even realize a problem exists because no limits were ever communicated. This leads directly into another important distinction. Once people begin understanding scarcity and value, they sometimes make a dangerous mistake. They start trying to manufacture value through manipulation. They hear that scarcity increases perceived value. Then they decide to become intentionally unavailable. They ignore messages. They delay responses. They pretend to be busy. They create artificial distance. They attempt to make themselves appear important. For a short period, these tactics can seem effective. People may become curious. Attention may increase. Reactions may become stronger. But eventually something happens. Authenticity reveals itself. Human beings are surprisingly good at detecting inconsistency. People may not immediately understand what feels wrong, but they often sense it. Artificial scarcity creates tension because it is based on performance rather than reality. The person is not actually occupied with meaningful priorities. They are simply acting unavailable, and acting requires constant maintenance. Every performance eventually becomes exhausting. Every mask eventually slips. This is why manipulation is fundamentally different from genuine value. Manipulation attempts to control perception. Value changes perception naturally. One depends on appearance, the other depends on reality. A person pretending to be busy constantly worries about maintaining the image. They must carefully manage responses. They must calculate interactions. They must create the illusion of scarcity. The entire process becomes a game. Games create short-term reactions. Reality creates long-term respect. People eventually notice when someone is unavailable only for strategic reasons. They notice when confidence is forced. They notice when distance is artificial. Trust begins to decline because authenticity disappears. Scarcity looks completely different. Real scarcity is not created, it emerges naturally. A person becomes scarce when their life becomes meaningful. Purpose creates scarcity. Goals create scarcity. Responsibilities create scarcity. Growth creates scarcity. A person deeply committed to building a business, mastering a skill, pursuing a mission, supporting a family, improving their health, or developing their character naturally becomes more selective with their time. They are not trying to appear valuable. They are focused on something valuable. This distinction changes everything. The person with a meaningful life does not need to convince others that they are busy. Their priorities make it obvious. The person with strong goals does not need to manufacture distance. Their commitments naturally limit availability. The person with standards does not need to perform confidence. Their actions consistently reinforce it. Notice how different this feels. One approach is based on strategy. The other is based on substance. One attempts to influence perception from the outside. The other develops value from the inside. This is why truly respected people often appear effortless. They are not spending their energy trying to look important. Their attention is focused elsewhere. They are occupied by meaningful pursuits. Their selectiveness is a consequence of purpose, not a tactic. The more meaningful a life becomes, the more carefully attention must be allocated. Time becomes more valuable. Energy becomes more valuable. Focus becomes more valuable. As a result, availability naturally decreases. Not because people are being excluded, because priorities exist. And priorities always require trade-offs. This leads to the deepest principle of all. Most people seek respect from others before developing respect for themselves. They want validation first, approval first, recognition first. They hope that once enough people respect them, they will finally feel valuable. But psychology often works in the opposite direction. External respect usually follows internal respect. The relationship people have with themselves quietly influences every interaction they experience. The way someone treats their own time teaches us how to treat it. The way someone speaks to themselves influences how others speak to them. The standards they accept become the standards others expect. Every action sends information. Every decision communicates value. A person who constantly sacrifices their priorities for approval teaches others that their priorities are negotiable. A person who constantly apologizes for existing teaches others that their presence requires justification. A person who constantly seeks permission teaches others that their confidence depends on external approval. These messages are rarely spoken aloud, yet they shape perception powerfully. Self-respect begins with small decisions. Keeping promises to yourself, protecting commitments, honoring your priorities. Refusing to tolerate behavior that violates your standards. These actions seem insignificant when viewed individually, but over time they create identity. They establish a relationship with yourself, and people notice. Not because they analyze every detail consciously, but because behavior reveals beliefs. A person who values themselves behaves differently from someone who does not. They speak differently. They decide differently. They negotiate differently. They respond differently. They carry themselves differently. The difference often has little to do with confidence and everything to do with self-respect. When someone genuinely values their own time, they stop giving it away thoughtlessly. When someone genuinely values their own energy, they stop investing it where it is repeatedly wasted. When someone genuinely values their own life, they stop allowing every external demand to determine how they live. This creates a powerful shift. People begin responding differently, not because manipulation is occurring, not because games are being played, but because the signals being communicated have changed. The person is no longer discounting themselves. And when a person stops discounting themselves, the people around them gradually stop doing it as well. Every marketplace follows value signals. Human relationships are no different. If you constantly reduce your own value, many people will accept the discount. If you consistently communicate self-respect through your actions, standards, and boundaries, people begin adjusting their perception. The world often takes its cues from the way individuals treat themselves, and that process begins long before anyone else notices it. The greatest irony is that most people spend years searching for respect in places where it can never truly be found. They search for it in approval. They search for it in popularity. They search for it in constantly proving themselves to others. But respect is rarely earned by making yourself available to everyone. More often, it is earned by understanding the value of what you already possess. Throughout this video, we have uncovered a psychological truth that operates quietly beneath countless human interactions. Scarcity creates value. Constant availability lowers perceived value. Attention is one of the most valuable resources you own. Boundaries create respect. Fake scarcity eventually fails because people can sense when something is not genuine. And real value does not come from playing games. It comes from self-respect. The people who command the most respect are usually not the people demanding it. They are not constantly seeking validation. They are not chasing approval. They are not trying to convince the world of their worth every day. Instead, they understand something that many people never learn. They understand that their time is limited. Their energy is limited. Their attention is limited. Because these things are limited, they treat them carefully. So don't be free. Not because you are better than anyone else. Not because you should become cold, distant, or arrogant. But because your life has value, your time has value, your attention has value, your focus has value, your energy has value. And every time you give those things away without thought, you teach the world to overlook what should have been appreciated. The moment you begin protecting your time, people notice. The moment you begin respecting your boundaries, people notice. The moment you stop seeking permission to value yourself, people notice. Not because you changed who you are, but because you stopped hiding your worth. And that is the dark psychology of value. The world often respects what is difficult to access, but it respects most the person who knows their own worth and refuses to trade it away for temporary approval. As you leave this video, take a moment to ask yourself one question. Where in your life are you giving away your attention, energy, and time without receiving the respect they deserve? The answer to that question may change far more than you expect. If you enjoy